前らを超えて海賊王になる男だ。
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
What does it mean to be free? This is a question that Monkey D. Luffy answers with every action that he takes and every word that he speaks. He responds with his very essence, from deep within his soul. It's not something that he thinks about often, nor is it something that he consciously reflects on. Being free is just something that he is. Luffy hears the demands of an oppressive world and he rejects them by declaring his freedom and what that means to him to anyone that tries to stand in his way. There is no better character that Oda could have written to serve as the protagonist of One Piece. In this video, I'm going to be talking a bit more about Luffy's portrayal of freedom as well as destiny, why he is the way that he is, and why he's so special to so many people. When I first started watching One Piece, I was very reluctant to believe that I could ever enjoy it. With that said, the first episode managed to capture my attention more than I expected, and it was entirely due to the introduction of Monkey D. Luffy. At the time, I couldn't care less about the story, but that first scene really stuck with me, and it took me a while to fully understand why. If you don't know, the first appearance of Luffy in the anime is different from the manga. It's the scene of him bursting out of a barrel, smiling and screaming with his arms in the air. Looking back, I couldn't imagine a better first impression. This isn't me taking shots at the manga, which is obviously incredible. It's just that hearing him laugh with joy, shouting at the top of his lungs, somehow told me everything I needed to know about Monkey D. Luffy and the unforgettable journey that I was about to embark on. Of course, to say that I knew everything about the character merely from watching him break out of a barrel is a bit of an oversimplification. Don't get me wrong, he has a lot of depth. However, he's always been candidly upfront about who he is. To better understand who that person is, we need to go back to his early childhood. When he was growing up, Luffy didn't have many people around. He was a very lonely kid, and this gave him plenty of time to discover himself, free from external influence. He spent most of his time wandering around his island and fighting for his life in the jungle. All he really knew was that he liked exploring, he didn't like being told what to do, and he hated feeling alone. Dodon couldn't contain his desire for adventure. Garp constantly tried to persuade Luffy into becoming a marine to no avail. Ace literally tried to kill him, but Luffy wanted a friend so bad that he never gave up. All of these examples are tied to one aspect of Luffy's personality, his resolve. Once he sets his mind on something, he will not budge. He felt compelled to explore, so he did. He didn't like the idea of being a marine, so he didn't become one. He wanted a friend, so he stuck to Ace like gum to a shoe. Why is he like this?
Why are you the way that you are?
Maybe he was born that way. Maybe his environment shaped him to be so determined. As is often true in real life, it was probably a mix of both nature and nurture interacting together. There's no doubt that something about his genes and his connection with the D-Clan imbued him with incredible resolve. At the same time, living on his own with such a wild spirit surely conditioned him to trust his own instincts and forced him to become unnaturally intuitive. So whenever he's faced with a challenge or presented with an opportunity, Luffy immediately knows what he's going to do next. At one point during Enies lobby, Nami even compares his instincts to those of an animal. I think that's pretty accurate considering how he grew up. His most basic instincts are what fuel his every action, because that's how he learned to survive and to get what he wants. When you combine that with a kid who tries to make friends with anyone or anything that moves, it leads to the development of an extreme emotional awareness. Luffy may be an idiot, but he is very emotionally intelligent. He can read people like a book, and he's a brilliant judge of character. He's able to quickly recognize what type of person someone is. He doesn't need to know what they've been through. He can sense their true nature by listening to his gut. This is ultimately what led to him finding his first friend in Ace and eventually Sabo too. Before we continue discussing Luffy's development as a child, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about who he is in the present. Across the entirety of both pre- and post-time skip, he is someone who lives and breathes freedom. We see this in the way that he communicates with zero filter, how he feeds into every impulse, and most of all, in his pure contentment in every moment. In other words, his commitment to always speaking his mind and following his heart allow him to find happiness no matter the situation. As the man himself once said to Vivi in Alabasta, "If you're hungry, eat." That logic sums up just about every decision Luffy has ever made. He doesn't worry about what others might think of him or about if things will go his way. When he has a thought, he says it. When he wants to do something, he does it. Sometimes this attitude gets confused for carelessness, and to be honest, that's fair considering who we're talking about. Luffy is my favorite character ever, but there was actually a period of time where I could not stand him, and this is one of the reasons why. I felt like he was too rash and impulsive to be the captain of this crew. Eventually though, I realized that these qualities have some real charm and intention behind them. In Chapter 2, when Luffy first reveals his dream of becoming Pirate King to Kobe, he tells him that he's not afraid to die, after which he says this.
海賊王になるって俺が決めたんだからそのために戦って死ぬんなら別にいい
It's not about whether or not he can actually do it, he's going after his dream because it's his dream. He's not afraid to die because he knows that he's giving it his full effort every single day. For Luffy, to live without ever trying at all is a fate worse than death. It's why he smiles in what were seemingly his final moments on the scaffold in Logtown. At first, Kobe couldn't understand this mentality, but he's not the only one. There are dozens of characters throughout One Piece that can't wrap their head around Luffy's simple motivations. As previously mentioned, it went over my head too. That's because most people get so caught up in fears, excuses, or doubts that they never act on their dreams at all. Either that or they settle for something less ambitious. Not just in One Piece, but in real life. On the flip side, that mentality makes zero sense to Luffy. He frequently gets frustrated with others for not doing the things that they want to do. Sometimes this leads to him coming off as insensitive, but it's only because he genuinely can't wrap his head around the concept of hesitation.
でっけえくせに弱虫で泣き虫なんて
Luffy finds freedom by ignoring his inhibition. He acts before he thinks. He doesn't get stuck in the past or caught up in the future. He focuses on the here and now. As long as he's doing everything within his power to move a little closer to his goals, then he is satisfied. This is true for something as lofty as becoming Pirate King, and it's also true for something as small as finding a really cool beetle. What makes Luffy such a profound character in my opinion is that everything about his enigmatic personality is a reflection of his childhood. The reason he's always been upfront about who he is because he's always known who he is. He's been saying that he'll become king of the pirates since before he was 10 years old. This is why he always appears to be naive, because he literally holds on to the same mindset that he had as a kid. Luffy repeatedly proves that his happy-go-lucky disposition is not naivete. There is an underlying maturity within his childishness. His whimsical nature is backed by real confidence and ambition. Everywhere he goes, he's initially met with condescending laughter for moving about the world with a simplistic perspective. That is, until he proves with his actions that life is only as complicated as you make it. When he was running around exploring Goa Kingdom, he recognized that adventure was fun. Living on his own terms and following his own sense of wonder made him happy. Before long, he met a man named Shanks, who displayed a similar lifestyle to the one that made Luffy feel so free. Since Shanks was a pirate, Luffy immediately decided that he should be a pirate too. And because of his colossal ambition, he wanted to be the most free, so he would naturally have to become the Pirate King. Most children are prone to dreaming big, but usually those same children abandon those dreams as they grow older. They lose their childlike intuition either because of societal pressures or because the depravity of the world weathers them down. Personally, I've found that the more I embrace the things that made me happy when I was younger, the happier I am in the present. What makes Luffy special is that he never abandoned his inner child. He used it to find a direction for his life and he held onto it tightly. One of my favorite arcs in One Piece is the flashback with Ace, Luffy, and Sabo because it makes this aspect of the character abundantly clear. He's not immune to pain, he's not oblivious to the dark society he was born into. He carries his pain with him, faces the oppression that hangs over him and his friends, and he dares to smile anyway. Basically, he's human like anyone else, only he never lost sight of what he wanted to do and who he wanted to be. By the time I got to this point in the story, I had come around to thoroughly appreciating the writing of Luffy. But if there were any remaining doubts, they were completely washed away by this backstory. This is where everything clicked for me. Seeing the beautifully real origins of his ridiculous carefree way of life offered a powerful glimpse into what One Piece as a whole has always been trying to say. Ace, Sabo, and Luffy were just 3 little kids with nowhere to call home. They bonded over their mutual desire for something more. From their tiny, insignificant island, they stared out at the horizon as they fantasized about conquering the seas. Each one of them saw something different, but they collectively believed in the possibility because, to a child, anything is possible. Having said that, Luffy's dream, whatever it may be, was ridiculous even to Ace and Sabo at the time. As it later turns out, the seemingly immature whims of a kid were also the same goal of the man who once ushered in a new era. What was once a moment of youthful spontaneity is unquestionably going to be the key to liberating the entire world. Despite Luffy's big dreams and unwavering optimism, he is not invincible. He's very aware of this though, especially because of his childhood experiences. Through his time alone, his time with Shanks, and his time with his brothers, he discovered a glimpse into the dangers of the world and the limitations of himself. Many people are self-conscious of their flaws and either try to conceal them or compensate for them in some way. Not Luffy. He's afraid of being weak because he's afraid of not being able to protect his friends. He's not ashamed of anything. He's not worried about being seen negatively by others, nor does he fear making mistakes. Like I said before, he's always known exactly who he is. He is so at peace with himself that he finds comfort in his own imperfection. Basically, my point is that Luffy's shameless authenticity and vulnerability are a major factor of his free spirit. In the same way that his ignorance of his own inhibition makes him free, so too does his acceptance of his flaws. This is one of his most endearing qualities in my opinion. I love that he's often shown to be annoying and stupid even to his crewmates. And I think that's one of the reasons why both the Straw Hats and the audience are so drawn to him, because he doesn't try to be anything that he's not. Luffy's confidence is not arrogance. He knows his limits and yet he barrels forward anyway. By embracing his own weaknesses, he's able to attain true strength. He focuses on and refines the things that he can do rather than thinking about what he can't. He applies this philosophy not only to himself, but to others as well. He judges people based on their specific positive qualities, not their usefulness. His crew is proof of that. From the start, Luffy knew that he would need a navigator, a cook, a doctor, etc. But he didn't want anyone to fill those roles. He wanted people that he could call his friends first. This is why he was so adamant about going after Nami when she left the crew. He could care less about finding a navigator. Who he really wanted was Nami, because he liked her for who she was, not what she provided. Luffy knows that he wouldn't have a chance at becoming Pirate King without relying on his friends. One of the best examples of this is found during his fight with Arlong. A major theme of that fight is strength. Arlong takes excessive pride in the massive power difference between the average fishman versus the average human. At one point during their confrontation, he repeatedly mocks Luffy for his inferiority, but Luffy doesn't disagree. He tells him that he doesn't know how to use a sword, and he doesn't know how to navigate either. He can't cook, and he can't tell lies. He even says he can't live without help from a lot of people. Luffy beats Arlong because the strength of a fishman is ultimately no match for the strength that humans achieve when working together. All of this is to say that despite Luffy's larger-than-life persona, he is remarkably humble. It is through that humility that he has become self-actualized. He allows himself to be lifted up by those around him, and he devotes his entire being to supporting them right back. He is free from insecurity. He wears his heart on his sleeve and walks with his head held high. His mind is so incredibly light because there is no ego weighing him down. With all of this talk about freedom, there's an elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. We need to talk about Luffy's destiny. Fair warning, there will be a few loose spoilers in this section for Wano and Egghead. If you're not caught up to either arc, don't worry, I'll give a brief warning before each spoiler with a timestamp that you can skip ahead to. So, ever since post-time skip began, it's become increasingly clear that Luffy and his journey are tied to fate. With the introduction of Joy Boy, Luffy has been heavily speculated to merely be the present-day manifestation of that figure. It's also implied that the return of this Joy Boy was inevitable. Naturally, this has raised a valid question. Does Luffy really have free will? It can be easy to assume that the deterministic nature of a prophecy automatically contradicts any notion of one's own freedom. Nevertheless, I don't think that's entirely true within the context of One Piece. Unfortunately, there's really no way I can comprehensively cover the free will debate in this video. There's also no concrete answer to that debate that will satisfy everyone, and there never will be. What I can do is take a look into the core philosophies of One Piece's narrative in order to hopefully offer some insight into how Oda has addressed these topics so far and how he will likely address them in the future. In order to understand how Oda usually tackles these kinds of questions, we need to look at 3 philosophies that I believe serve as the story's primary foundation: Romanticism, Existentialism, and Absurdism. Romanticism is all about appealing to the emotional and unscientific aspects of life. Romanticists don't believe that science is sufficient enough on its own to describe the human experience. They believe that because humans are naturally emotional beings, it makes no sense to try to derive meaning from logic. Instead, Romanticism emphasizes intuition, imagination, and individuality as valid elements of reality. A good example of Romanticism in One Piece is the significant focus on emotional storytelling. Another is how characters are often portrayed with extremely unique qualities and values that were derived from their past emotional experiences. Existentialism also emphasizes individuality as one of its core virtues, but it differs in its rationality. Existentialists would say that there most likely is some higher meaning or power out there, but that humans have no way of ever understanding it. Therefore, life may as well be inherently meaningless. So the meaning of life is something that we must define for ourselves, and we must challenge our pre-existing beliefs in order to attain pure authenticity. Think about how each member of the Monkey D family has found their own individual life paths. Finally, absurdism is similar to nihilism in claiming that life literally is meaningless. There is no higher meaning that can be discovered. Everything is nonsensical, and it's pointless to try to find real truth. Although, unlike nihilism, absurdism appeals to a much more optimistic view of the world. Even though life is absurd, it still exists. Our lives are all that we have, and the idea that we must strive to transcend it is also absurd. It's all about acknowledging our own mortality, choosing to persist anyway, and in doing so, recognizing that heaven is already on earth. Freedom is something that constantly lies within our grasp, but it is only through radical acceptance that we can find it. It goes without saying that the world of One Piece is intrinsically absurd. There are islands with lion-pig hybrids and islands with really long horses. There's a mountain with water that flows upwards and snails that work as phones. None of it makes any sense, but we witnessed the Straw Hats become more alive than ever after daring to sail into the chaos head first. One Piece has always been about emotion over reason, individuality, personal meaning, and the absurdity of life. Even more so, as I'm sure you've noticed, all of these concepts are embodied by Luffy himself. He's driven by emotion and his individual beliefs, which he discovered in his most natural state. He faces a senseless reality and he chooses to laugh, living his life to the fullest anyway. To some degree, all of the philosophies at hand go along with the potentiality of fate, but they aren't particularly concerned with actually finding out whether or not it exists. Even if something like fate did exist, it would change nothing. We should still try our best to live for what we believe in, because if not, then what's even the point? Now let's break down where the concept of fate really comes from. Fate is based on hard determinism, which is the idea that all of our actions are caused by past events outside of our control. It's an argument of logic, and free will cannot be adequately explained through logic. But remember, One Piece isn't meant to be a completely logical story. It's intentionally made to be outlandish in order to deliver its deeper messages with a strong impact. Egghead Island is a great example. If you haven't yet seen or finished the arc, then you can skip ahead to this time on the screen. Okay, so this is an arc all about the wonders of science. Dr. Vegapunk is the smartest man in the world, and yet even he concedes that science is limited when discussing the spiritual aspects of life. Within the arc, we see concepts such as the power of love and imagination treated very seriously. Vegapunk himself even deduced that human souls are a real thing. Most of all, we see perhaps the greatest example of a character's will defying science in the case of Kuma. The strength of his will and the love for his daughter were able to essentially reverse Vegapunk's procedure on his brain. What all of this tells us is that spirituality is crucial when considering the mysteries of the One Piece world. One Piece claims that a person's will has genuine power and influence. I mean, the very notion of inherited will is proof of that. Even though fate also exists, it's not unfounded to assume that Oda isn't wholly discarding the theme of freedom. Fate isn't a new theme in the story. It's been there the whole time alongside freedom. It was hinted that the Roger Pirates knew someone like Luffy would come along as far back as Reverse Mountain. My interpretation is that One Piece's fate is largely predetermined but also capable of being influenced by strong wills. If enough like-minded people come together for a single purpose, they can inject their wills into the flow of time. Or if there is one person whose will is strong enough, they too can reach far into the future. We have seen this happen in the story on multiple occasions in arcs like Skypiea, Wano, and most notably, the mystery of the Void Century. There's no doubt that Luffy was destined to change the world because of who he is, but that doesn't necessarily mean he can't be free. I think it's all a matter of how you really define freedom. Is it being totally in control of your life path, or is it living your truth regardless? It's still unclear how exactly Oda will explore the tension between freedom and destiny, but what's really important is that this debate is irrelevant to Luffy. Just like in existentialism, romanticism, and absurdism, Luffy's sense of fulfillment comes from his subjective experience and his own personal meaning of life. If you somehow don't know about Luffy's most recent transformation, then skip ahead to this time here. But ever since he's unlocked Gear 5, multiple characters have confronted him, referring to his connections to both Nika and Joy Boy. Yet every single time, Luffy couldn't care less. Whatever fate he's connected to means nothing to him. He's still going to live his life the way that he wants to. If he's going to liberate the world, then it's going to be on his own terms. He's effectively communicating that it doesn't matter if you're destined or not. If you want something, it's still up to you to go and take it. In conclusion, Luffy is one of the most straightforward characters of all time. Almost everything you need to know about him is presented from the very beginning. It can take some time to fully understand him though. At first glance, he appears to be stupid, naive, and recklessly overconfident. While there are certainly times when those descriptions are true, there is a hidden sophistication to Luffy's simplistic personality. In a world where everyone desperately strives for wealth, fame, and power, Luffy has no interest in any one of them. His legendary journey, which has led to him taking down monstrous enemies 3 times his size, all began with a child that longed for friendship and adventure. Everything he's achieved is for the purpose of having fun with those he cares about most. He is the epitome of sincerity, kindness, and vulnerability. In life, it's not uncommon to become overwhelmed by the cold, indifferent cruelty of the universe. We may get buried under our own anxious and skeptical thoughts. We may get caught up trying to make sense of it all, hopelessly reaching for the feeling of being in control. In the struggle to do so, it can be easy to lose oneself. Here's a quick fun fact. Luffy's name comes from the sailing term luff, which refers to the act of turning a ship so that it's moving closer with the direction of the wind. Simply put, it means to go with the flow. Even though life is scary and confusing, at one point, everything was simple. When we're at our youngest, it's easy to dream and to enjoy things for what they are. But that state of being isn't something that disappears, it's something that's forgotten. We may feel compelled to find logical solutions, but our emotions and deepest desires make up our most truthful realities. Sometimes you just have to listen to your gut and move without thinking. There is no point focusing on the past or the future, because all we have is the present moment. By making peace with our most natural selves, connecting with those around us, and doing everything we can to live right now, we can stare into the abyss and find true joy. That is what Luffy's story is all about. That is what makes him special. That is what it means to be free.